Here.
No, that's,
This is to get the camera
that's to get the
going.
TV going.
There you go. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming to the Bylaw Committee public meeting. Tonight is Tuesday, September 21st at 6:30 p.m. For those of you here, just know that the meeting is being live broadcast on Charter Channel 191, and it's also being recorded for future viewing. So welcome to those of you who are here who have joined us. Let me introduce everyone here at the table at the far end. We have,
John
I'm sure, very familiar faces. Go ahead.
Yep, John Workman, Fire Chief.
Chris Fowles, member of the Bylaws Advisory Committee.
Francine Tishman, Bylaws Committee also.
Virginia Ahart, Bylaw Committee.
Ian Illingsworth, Police Chief.
Okay, thank you. So the purpose of tonight's public meeting is to give residents an opportunity to comment on 3 draft bylaws, the copies of which are available on the town website, with print versions available for participants here tonight. They're over on the side table here. We'll be discussing soliciting/canvassing, nuisance/peace and quiet, and building numbering. We're here to listen and to consider your comments for inclusion in our next iteration of these bylaws. A little bit about how we got here. The Bylaw Committee is charged with updating existing bylaws and drafting new bylaws when and where needed. In each instance, the Bylaw Committee produces a version based on its research of Massachusetts general laws and other applicable town bylaws and regulations. In doing so, we work closely with department heads whose expertise and responsibilities for the content is very important to this process. This committee does not produce any bylaw without the input and/or review by relevant department heads or town committees. The bylaws under consideration tonight have implications for public safety, and for that reason, Fire Chief John Workman and Police Chief Ian Illingsworth are with us tonight, as they both were significant contributors to these drafts. We relied heavily on Ian and John for content and for guidance, and we appreciate their efforts and their expertise. In order that our discussion follow an orderly pattern, we'll discuss the bylaws in the following order. Soliciting will be first, nuisance and peace and quiet will be the second, and building numbering will be the third and final. Once all comments are completed on one bylaw, we'll move to the next one. We will ask speakers to come forward to the microphone, identify themselves, and make their comments. Just line up, not that there's going to be a long line here, but just line up behind the podium and step to the microphone when the previous speaker has completed their remarks. I just want to, as we do at town meeting, please wait before you make a second comment until all others have had an opportunity to speak at least once on the topic. All comments are to be addressed to the folks here at the table, since we have the responsibility for gathering the information in each of these drafts that we're discussing tonight. Tonight is not about debating differences of opinion. It's about sharing your perspective on the draft bylaws. All remarks are to be appropriate and respectful. We're here to listen, to gather feedback from your comments that will be considered in our revisions. So thank you. So with that, we can begin. And I would just like to open it up to see if there's anyone, before we get to the specific bylaw, who has any comment generally about this process that they want to comment on, what you've seen so far. Okay, nothing from the audience, but we do have, as you know, we solicited input through the town website, and we did have a couple of comments. So I'm going to ask, in the interest of transparency, that we committed to sharing all those email comments at this meeting tonight. So we'll ask Virginia Earhart if she'll read the comments that we received via email that just covered the general topic of bylaw revision. Virginia?
General, Terry Ann Hogue. I've read the 3 documents. I am in favor of all 3 bylaws that are proposed. I think that all the details were covered. Thank you for your time and energy on this. Sincerely, Terry Ann Hogue. And then Cindy Palmer. First, thanks for the colossal effort and tremendous time you and your predecessors have contributed to this important process. I have reviewed the 3 draft bylaws and have no particular comment with the numbering, lettering, nor solicitation canvas drafts. I plan to attend, and she's here, the public meeting on September 21 to hear the discussion of the nuisance piece and quiet draft before commenting. See you then.
Okay. All right, thank you, Virginia. So we'll move on then to our first bylaw, and that would be the soliciting/canvassing. And we're opening it up to comments from you folks first before we go to the email comments. So is there anyone here, and you have a copy of the bylaw, is there anyone here who has any comments about this draft that you would like to share or that you would like us to consider before we finalize the content of this bylaw?
I just want to say one thing. I know.
Oh, excuse me. I do need to mention that people need to come to the podium.
Forget it. I can't do that.
Leave your name. No? I'm sorry.
We can't hear you otherwise.
Email it to us.
We can't hear you otherwise.
Yeah, we can't hear you, and the people at home won't be able to hear you. All right, sorry. Is there anyone else? Oh, okay. This is going to go quickly. So with that, at the conclusion of having received no public comments, we will go to our email comments that we got on soliciting, and so I'll turn to Chris Files to read those to you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Francine. We received, I think, 4 comments by email. The first one is from Wayne Theroux at 37 Coleman Road, and the comment is, "No solicitation on any property that is posted in capital letters, no trespassing, no solicitation. A sign-up list, if you want to be bothered by the nuisance solicitation, sign up for it. Any violation is a major fine." Second comment from Jim Palermo of, hello, Palmer Meadow?
Glendale Road.
Glendale Road, sorry, Glendale Road. Thank you for an excellent job in drafting the bylaws. I appreciate the work your task requires. I have only one question, and that is with regard to Article 15, Section 3B1. Does the distribution of, quote, literature, periodicals, or other printed materials for commercial purposes apply to publications such as the Reminder or other similar publications that are not specifically requested by a resident and which are not sent through the U.S. Postal Service? It appears that the Reminder, for example, has a commercial purpose by virtue of the fact that it's widely distributed in order that the publisher may derive revenue from the paid advertising it sells to enterprises which provide goods and services for profit. Best wishes. Number 3, from Debbie D'Amico. The exceptions of having a permit seem to include most, if not all, types of solicitation I receive. Why doesn't anyone soliciting door-to-door require a permit? Churches, charities, etc. should at least be required to register their activity. Thanks. And the last one, Tina Tudrin, regarding soliciting, well-written, no suggestions for changes. So that's the sum total of the comments we got by email for that particular bylaw draft. Does that engender any further thoughts or discussion from the audience tonight? No? Okay.
I think it raised a couple of good points that
Yeah.
perhaps we didn't consider that we need to go back and think about, especially about the need for, free publications that are delivered to people's homes, whether with or without their permission. Okay. Come on up.
Cindy Palmer, 71 Glendale Road. And I'm sorry, can't put my finger on this, but I'm glad Jim Palermo brought up that comment about the reminder. I think periodically we also see other kind of advertising stuff, and what I'm missing is and I haven't, oh, here it is, there is a violation, might result in a $300 fine. So if somebody's advertising their small business such as makeup consultant or dog grooming or something like that, and they just happen to be running around putting it on people's doors or something, of course, it's illegal to put it in their mailboxes, right? Because that's federal law against putting things in people's US mailboxes. But so that meant somebody would have to, how would that process work if somebody violated it, put their advertising materials out, and would somebody have to complain, or would the police department have to fine them, or how, that's my question. How would that work in terms of enforcement?
Well, I guess first and foremost, it would be, and then Chief, you can chime in, our responsibility to notify people that these are the rules of the town, and that if you plan to solicit or canvass, you need to follow the guidance in this bylaw, which starts with going to the police department, registering and getting a permit, and you know, for a time period, and there will be a fee and a background check, just as the bylaw states. And that applies to everyone except those exceptions that are noted in this bylaw, which have to do with religious, charitable, political groups or organizations, as well as youth organizations and groups. So I know people were concerned about the Girl Scouts not being able to go door to door to sell cookies without registering. That does not apply here. So is there anything you want to add, Chief?
In that situation, if someone were to call the police department on that relative to not, perhaps they had a permit at the time that you may not have known about if they dropped it at the door. But if it's something that was a concern, we could certainly look into our records to see if somebody had a permit for that, and if they didn't, try to identify who it was at that point, and then issue a citation, or at least a warning at first, whatever discretionary authority the officer could use.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other thoughts? I just wanted to point out one thing. One of the things that we had put in here, which had been recommended by others, was that solicitation and canvassing activities are allowed only between the hours of noon and 5 p.m. So it was kind of a limited time frame. So that was one thing that a couple of people had suggested to us that we added in. But, okay,
Okay.
I think that's it then for any comments on soliciting or canvassing, unless newcomers have any thoughts that you'd like to share. If not, we'll move on to the next one, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. We're ready for the comments on nuisance / peace and quiet. So please come forward, identify yourself, and let's hear what you have to say.
Party started. Doric Dodds, 48 High Street. Let's see if you can hear me. First, I'd like to say thanks to the committee for taking the time to do this. It's very nice of you, and I do have some idea how quickly the time goes by when this sort of thing is being worked on. In general, I see that what we have here is the attempt at controlling excessive noise during nighttime hours, basically 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., which is all very well. My belief is that doesn't go anywhere near far enough for improvement of quality of life the way we judge it to have been besmirched. As many of you know, we're right up here on High Street. That puts us very close not only to High Street itself, but also to this miserable Route 10 that used to be a pretty nice road when I was a kid and is horrible now. That road is grinding this poor little town into submission with all its racket and its traffic and its noise. And of course, the most offensive form of that noise is coming from heavy trucking. The most offensive noise from heavy trucking is coming from engine braking techniques, usually just called Jake brakes. These things are, I think, generally optional equipment that are put onto trucks. They do have useful emergency benefits. They do have brake lining wear saving benefits, I'm given to understand. And they're noisy. They're regulated in a lot of communities, including right here in the Commonwealth, and not just during the nighttime hours. Please, folks, let's clamp down on that particular class of noise, if no other, all day, all night. There is precedent here in the Commonwealth, so I take that to mean it's not unlawful to prohibit. You generally find signs, Longmeadow comes to mind, engine braking prohibited. I believe I've also seen that sign posting done on state highways. I'm not aware whether or not jurisdiction gets altered because of the state aspect of a highway, but that's the thing we need most. Apart from that, anything else that we can do to quiet down the place would be a benefit too. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Cindy Palmer, Glendale Road. It's really hard to follow Doric because he's such an excellent speaker. I also looked into the Jake break and I totally agree and really want to represent that I think our town could utilize a much stronger approach to the absolute reduction and non-use of Jake brakes or compression brakes or air brakes or whatever they're called. I did some research. Some of the towns have $200 to $300 fines associated with them. They have to have signage. They have to notify people. I saw comments, by truckers who say when we see a sign, we don't use them. All kinds of controversy, of course, on that. And in addition, I don't know about Longmeadow, but I saw the city of Holyoke has a law or an ordinance against it, section 86-217. And others that I didn't actually read were Hingham, Ayer, Boxford, Norwell, Salem. And some of them are in the consideration stage. So, I mean, there is precedence, and I think it's important. I didn't know if we could do this on the state highway of Route 10. I hope so. I think it's important. I live on a corner, and the corner is, sort of the bottom of a hill. A Cold Spring Road comes down, and it comes down from West Hampton on the corner of Glendale. And it is quite toxic, really. In addition to the Jake brakes, I also did a little looking into the motorcycle noise. Now, I don't know very much about mechanical things. I make it up if I say I know anything. But there is a federal code of the federal law that says that any tampering with a muffler is illegal. And so I was told by somebody that sometimes people buy their motorcycles and they go and they get them inspected and they're all fine, but then they change their muffler. They tamper with it. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I understand. The Code of Federal Regulations includes 40 CFR 205-169, and I can give you this, folks. And also another one, 40 CFR 205-173-2, which includes labeling requirements and the statement against tampering. And so anybody wants to come and sit on my deck on a beautiful summer evening and listen to the motorcycles coming down well before 10 p.m., 4 in the afternoon, et cetera, you'll hear how loud they can be, far louder than a lawnmower or happy people playing in their swimming pool or anything like that, or any kind of agricultural, equipment noise. So I'd like to add that for consideration and have strong fines related to it. Now, having said that, I think that we ask our enforcement people to stretch very, very far, and I don't know how you would handle that if I, a citizen, called up and said, this is crazy, and I'm not going to be able to identify the license plate number. I mean, they come down fast and go around, and it's this big. I don't know how that works, but I think we need to make an extremely strong effort to say that's unnecessary. It really is. I think the third thing I want to say, and I don't know how you can possibly control for this, is kind of the loud noise that some people insist on playing in their cars or even on their motorcycles. I love music. There's some music I love differently than others, and I just don't think it's fair to impose somebody else's taste of music on somebody, and it can be unbelievably loud and frankly dangerous, really, to young ears, etc. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Robert?
Robert Floyd, College Highway. I pledge to never follow Doric and Cindy again. Hard work. I totally respect what you do. As town moderator, I simply want to go on record and say that anyone in the audience at the town meeting that this proposed bylaw or any of the three bylaws are up, somebody has the right to try to amend the bylaw. For example, on the nuisance ending at 10, they could amend to ending at 11 or ending it earlier at 9 or something like that. So that would be debated if and when that amendment is accepted and seconded. That would be debated, and the town would vote on that amendment only, whether to change the bylaw as is or not, and then continue debating, talking about the original bylaw, and eventually vote on it. Cheers.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Robert. Anyone else? No, of course. Thank you.
Joanne Alderman, 48 High Street. I also want to commend you all for the thought and effort that you've put into drafting this nuisance peace and quiet law, bylaw. However, as Doric said, to say excessive noise is prohibited in the town of Southampton between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. just does not go far enough. A big problem from my perspective, and I think probably from a lot of people's perspective, is the excessively loud augmented exhaust pipes that have become so popular on motorcycles, some cars, and some trucks. We often cannot sit out on our porch, which, as you know, has probably one of the best views in town, and we love it up there. But when you can't sit out and enjoy just a quiet evening or an afternoon because of the revving of car and motorcycle engines that are driving by our house or up and down the street, and even 2 or 3 streets away, there have been many times that it sounds like there's cars, bikes, drag racing on Route 10. I mean, it really does. And you hear them going on 5 minutes and longer because they are so loud. And, you know, in terms of going up and down our street, you can't. They stop at the top of Maple Street, and especially if they're coming up Maple Street, and then they rev their engines, and they see how fast and how loud they can go down High Street. And, you know, we might see them for 3 seconds. That's not long enough to be able to, you know, check the make of the motorcycle or car and get a license plate number or anything like that. And many times, if they see me outside, and there's been times I pull out my phone, I still don't have time to take a photo, or, but they look at me like, yeah, you can't, you know, you can't get me. I get that sense. They're just doing it to show off and to say, look at me. It's very irritating. The noise is not only irritating, but causes, in me, it causes a visceral reaction, which is not healthy. I mean, I was just reading an article this morning that loud noise can increase blood pressure and many other things, and can even, if people who are exposed to it, can have a higher risk of not only stroke, heart attack, but Alzheimer's disease. So there's a lot of reasons why we need to promote quiet, especially in the residential areas. I think, if nothing else, certainly I think this ought to pass, or a noise ordinance bylaw needs to pass. But I think we also need to have some signs up around town as you come into the town, maybe at the in residential areas that spell out in big letters, "quiet, please." And to respect our citizens. I mean, the impression is that people are doing this on purpose. I don't mind when, I don't like the Jake breaks, but trucks have to go by, and I don't think they're trying to be excessively noisy usually. But if people need to respect the citizens of this town and showing their respect by being more quiet. So those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more comments from the public? Yes. Okay,
Hi, I know it's not going to be a surprise that I don't support,
you have to just identify yourself.
Rainey Groden, Cheryl Lane. I generally don't support bylaws that establish social norms for the community. Not a big fan of, target practice and dirt bikes and things like that, but they're not illegal. And I think we just have to be very careful that we're not being culturally insensitive or classist in some of the decisions that we make as a town. And so, to that end, I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. The biggest noise that I hear in my house is the actual from barns, and I actually don't see anything in here about that. Did I miss that?
No, but we do have other comments to read, and it is included
Okay.
in other people's comments.
Okay, so I didn't see anything about military things. The other thing I just wanted to mention is it's a non-fine. It's a permitting by the police or Board of Health. And so I appreciate you both being here, but I also think that there's still going to be a judgment call in terms of the amount of noise. There's no decibel, I just don't know. There's going to be a judgment call no matter what is written on paper. So I just would appreciate hearing from the chiefs about that. And I had one other comment, and that is the town approved a bylaw system, which my understanding is a system that provides bylaws that get automatically updated so long as we continue to pay an annual fee. And is there an established bylaw for the same sort of thing here, and how does it compare to what's been created here? So those are just my questions.
Okay. Thank you. Just to answer the one question, I don't see a current,
We don't have a
Right.
current bylaw,
right?
no. But I believe she's talking about the E360 code for other communities.
Okay.
Yeah, we have researched other communities, and that's what got the input together in this. So we borrowed language from various other communities that have noise bylaws to fulfill this. And I think on the decibel issue, maybe, Chief, you could. Uh-huh.
So is that that is a bank of bylaws that are available to towns, and they do the work of updating Mass General law stuff? Is that my understanding? So that, do they have a bylaw for noise in the E360 bank of bylaws? Did I get that right?
Per town, right?
Yeah, it's per town. Towns develop their own bylaws. What they do is they
Codified.
they make certain that they're compliant,
Yeah,
which is, double checking what our attorneys would have done.
right.
They make sure that the language is consistent. They create a format that's easy for users in the town to follow, so that's not this, mystery trying to find the topic, the way they index things. And so it's an assistance to us. And it also,
Oh, okay.
when laws change, then they'll come back and notify us, hey, it's time because this happened.
Oh,
But
so
they
it's
don't-
not a
they don't
library of
originate-
bylaws?
They don't originate any of the material.
Okay.
They just assist us.
Okay.
Anything there?
No, but on the
Okay.
decibel issue, maybe if you wanted to mention that?
Well, with respect to decibels, you need obviously a calibrated instrument to do that, which we don't have access to. And that would fall under noise pollution versus this nuisance law. So as of right now, we would have no means to measure decibels because we don't have that type of instrument.
Okay. All right.
One more.
Go ahead.
I have two questions. Cindy Palmer. One is I want to hear a little bit more about the difference between noise pollution and this nuisance bylaw. But apropos specifically to that is an established business, or I don't know what you call it, the gun club that's off Route 10, that I've lived here for 26 years, and it's my subjective opinion that the frequency and the amount of noise generated from that has increased. That's just my opinion, and I've chatted with some neighbors. They feel the same way, and I think it goes very far and wide, because I live at least a mile away from it, and I can hear it, and my son lives 3 miles away from it, and he said he can hear it. And I know it's been around a long, long time, and I also think that sort of falls in the category of what Rini was saying, that, you know, we're sort of, that's sort of like, you know, somebody else's choice to do something, and I think it's fine. But if that falls into a noise pollution situation where the frequency and the loudness of the shooting is, and consistent with what Josie said about the, you know, the negative impact of noise, I think that we should wonder what we can do there, even if we ask them to do something to reduce the sound or silence the guns or something. I don't know anything about that. I do know that I was on the Master Plan Implementation Committee and still am to some extent, and that at least one comment that was provided to us by citizens who wanted to comment on master plan was that they live very close to that gun club, that they pay a lot of taxes in town, and that it really is a nuisance for them. That they apparently live considerably closer than I do, and I know I'm hearing it until 8:30, 9 p.m. at night in summer, and even when darkness falls, and it's a bit of a surprise there that they would still be shooting then. I don't know if there's lights back there or what. I don't know anything about it. So that's my question.
Sure, I can speak very objectively to that if you'd like. Mass general law actually has laws protecting gun clubs relative to shooting. And we have a town, a local jurisdiction, even a state, local jurisdictions federally. There is no regulatory authority to silence a gun range. In fact, our gun range timeframes are under the tolerance of the state law. And if you would want to research that, by all means, I can give you that chapter and section, just because it's very interesting. In fact, I found it today in preparation of this. So, but no, we do not have any regulatory authority over that, specifically to gun ranges, private or public.
All right, thank you. Are there any more public comments? Okay, then we'll move on and we'll ask Ian to read the comments that we received on email regarding nuisance and peace and quiet.
Sarah and Francis O'Donnell stated, "We have lived at 198 College Highway since 1972, and we'd like you to know we heartily agree with all three bylaws, especially number 2. We wish that one could even be stronger, to include no engine brakes coming down the hill into the center of town, and something about the revving of the loud motorbikes and excessive mufflers on cars, trucks going up the hill after they leave the center. Thank you." Wayne Theroux states, "I live at 37 Coleman Road. I work 16-hour shifts in public safety. I arrive home from work and the streets are not plowed. I want to snow blow my driveway and my neighbor gets upset. He can contact the police and file a grievance." Mike O'Neill, "I believe this bylaw is long overdue. However, the time frame needs to be adjusted to 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. Anyone living near the gun range would go for this change." Tina Tudrin, 76 Russellville Road, "I think it is restrictive. I think it is restrictive and way too specific regarding rights in mostly rural community. I think the whole bylaw is not appropriate for a community of our size, and breach of peace laws already exist. I would like it scrapped. If it is kept, in parentheses, which I don't think it is necessarily, I would absolutely 100% add in language that states with X feet of community property, or strike that, within X feet of neighboring property for all of it, is as there is a big difference between my activities on a 10-acre parcel and those on a 1/4 acre lot in the development. If my neighbor has a motorcycle, they should be free to work on it at their own yard as long as we are not close by, and it's their right as an American citizen. Outdoor entertainment makes everything an exception anyways. Most of what residents do in their own yards is entertaining to them. For example, you need to remove entirely the section below as it seems burdensome to police with calls for petty issues. The bylaw outlaws Christmas caroling, kids yelling hello at a classmate while they ride bikes by, and crying babies. We already have a breach of a peace law en masse, so I think it should be removed below. Shouting, singing, and other loud noises on public streets or with volume at any time or place as to annoy or disturb the reasonable quiet, comfort, and repose of persons in any type of residence or in any office or of any persons in the vicinity.
Okay. And then we did have one more that I sent you, the email. It was a late one coming. If you
It
can't,
says, "Dear Bylaws Committee," this is from John and Maureen Sheehan, 127 Palmer Meadow Road, Southampton, Mass. "Dear Bylaws Committee, I was planning on participating in your public hearing tonight, but because of the spike in COVID cases, I won't be able to attend. I was planning on addressing 2 issues on the noise bylaws. Number 1, the excessive deafening noise from the military jets. They are so loud that we have to stop talking on the telephone or even in person until the jets pass over. Our house shakes sometimes and our windows rattle with the noise. Can the town set up a meeting with the commander or the commandant and their community relations department? 2, can something be done about increasing number of trucks and cars with revved up engines? They are a close second to the uproar of the jets from barns. Thank you for considering these 2 questions. John and Maureen Shannon, 127 Palmer Meadow Road, Southampton, Mass."
okay. Thank you, Ian. All right, with that, we're moving on to our third and final bylaw. So I'll open it up for public comment on the bylaw on building numbering. Any comments? Okay.
I'll just ask a question. Is this really going to be enforced? I mean, when I read it, I have a hard time even like, it must be on this side of the door, it has to be this wide, this high, this side of the, to me, it just seems, I'm just not sure, is this really going to be enforced? So I guess, then I wonder, why do we do it then? If it's only going to be forced when people go up to someone's houses for something else and it's not there, like the broken taillight situation? Like, I guess I just don't know why it's needed.
Okay, first of all, existing homes would be grandfathered. It's not a requirement unless you go for a permit. And when you get a building permit would be the time that this would apply to you. And it really is all in the interest of public safety to have legible, easy to read house numbers in the event, and we talked to the police chief and the fire chief, and and it was their recommendation. They get calls, and in some areas, the numbers are not necessarily always sequential. They have difficulty finding the home, and I can let John speak to that, since I know it's a major concern for the fire and the ambulance crew.
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak to it.
Just put your mic a little closer.
How's that? Good? So house numbering is always a challenge, just because there's so many varied situations every time you go. I'm not a cop, but as an emergency responder, it can be really difficult if there's not any house numbering that you can identify, especially at night. You're trying to get there quickly. You're searching for it. As I get older, I wear my glasses. It's hard, they're not driving glasses, especially the reading glasses. So house numbering can just be a challenge, and when it's not there, you can lose minutes turning around when you've already passed. The one thing that you can't write into any law is common sense. you wish you could, just, common sense where you could put a number where people are gonna see it, and that would be fine. I think for new houses, that's when you have enforcement. I mean, like I say, I'm not a police officer, I'm not gonna go and knock on somebody's house and say, oh, I don't like your house numbers because I can't see them. But if I have a, inspection that I'm doing and I notice that they don't have any house numbers, I know that the senior center will put them on I think they ask for a donation, but it's not a requirement. So there's things that you can do to get house numbers for your property that don't cost anything, and it helps emergency services tremendously. A bylaw, I think if you just kind of lay out what would be the ideal, it gives people something to go for. It gives them a perspective of what makes sense to emergency services. And this is something that Police Chief and myself have talked about. And this seemed to make sense to us. A big numbering that you can see, it's emergency services, you just want to find the house. So our only concern is to find your house. That's all we're looking to do. We're not looking to add on. I do code enforcement. I mean, there's so many laws and regulations in Massachusetts. I get it. And we're not looking to go out and beat on doors and say, oh, we don't like your number. But if we've got something that we're doing and we come across it, we've got something that we can go back to and say, hey, this is reasonable. It helps us find you. It's good for the community. It's good for anybody that lives here or the neighbor down the way that to know that, that's the next stop that you're going to go to for their house. So, I'm probably getting ahead of myself when I look at, there's an email just about size of lettering. Some of the tricky part is, like, everybody maintains their mailbox. And the mailbox works extremely well if it's on the side of the road that the house is on. Where it doesn't work so well is when it's on the opposite side of the road, because odd numbers are on one side, even numbers are on the other side. So people say, oh, well, it's on my mailbox. Well, if it's on the other side of the street, oh, geez, I just passed it. Now I got to turn around a big fire engine, which is not an easy thing to turn around. If there's a fire, hopefully you're going to see it. It's, an ambulance is trickier because it's not as easily identifiable. So the house numbering is just to give some sort of guidance, something to kind of, let's try and get to this area. And it's hard because there's so many different variations. You want to make it so that people can put it on the road or they can put it on their house, give them opportunities to do it how they feel fits their house.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's where I feel like it's the residents' decision.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been out looking for people's homes at 3 o'clock in the morning my entire career, and there's a difference between an education to landowners about being able to be identified and what would be helpful to do so that the house can be identified, and providing education versus making it a bylaw. And to me, it has to be in contrast. It has to be 6 inches. It has to be this wide. It has to be on this side of the door. I find it way too specific, and I think we should be doing education about the ability to find people's homes and what you can do to be more identifiable, but to make it a bylaw is where I find it. I can't, I have a hard time supporting that.
Yeah, I understand. I guess just my own personal thing is, I've worked with like Council on Aging to actually go and put the signs up. I've donated time for that, and really, it's about community and really, what's the thing to keep everybody safe? That's my only goal. So I get it. I wish you could just use common sense. I wish you could write that, and that would be enough. It's just a hard thing because you can't write that because it's different for everybody. So, and like I say, we're not looking to really police on it except for when somebody's building.
Okay. All right.
Does that answer your question?
It did.
Okay.
Any other comments? Okay, then with that, Ed.
Hi, Francine. Ed Gibson, Town Administrator. And I'm just going to go back to, I know what the intent is here. I've been around town. I've tried to locate some houses and have had a hard time doing it. So the intent is good, and it's all about public safety. But I think it's very important to drive that home and not just expect the new houses to do it and move forward. And I'm going to call your attention to the fact that Section 8 says The building inspector shall be the designated enforcement authority and shall apply these requirements to all new construction and/or renovations that require building permits. All violations will be subject to non-criminal ticketing at a fee schedule set periodically by the Select Board and town meeting. I will reference the fact that we all know, due to the wetlands bylaw, that the Attorney General now requires the fines or fees to be within the bylaw, which they are not currently here. So,
Okay,
just a reminder.
okay, thank you. All right. Any other comments on building numbering? All right, thank you. What I will do is ask John, we did have a comment by email, and ask him to read it as our final contribution to tonight's discussion.
Sure, yep, not sure if I'm pronouncing the last name correctly, but Tina Tudrin, 76 Russellville Road. The numbering bylaw for houses seems too specific and excessive. I would simply state each home or building must have an Arabic number of at least 3 inches and visible from X feet away. This number shall be posted at the entrance to the driveway of each residence within 3 feet of the roadway at the height of 2 to 4 inches. In the event of a multi-unit dwelling, unit letters or numbers must also be affixed to or within 2 feet of the main entrance to each unit. I think, do we comment on these?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. It is tough. I think when, if you're 50 feet away from something, 3 inches is basically a cell phone. I think it's a 1/4 inch bigger this way, and that's 6 inches. As I get older, it's easier to see 6 inches than it is to see 3 inches. You have to put some sort of guideline to it. That's simple, but, one of the things is, if you're putting it within 3 feet of a roadway, it then becomes a plowing issue. As you plow, it then becomes subject to getting knocked over. People are more apt to maintain a mailbox that gets plowed over than they are to maintain a house number. If you had common sense, everybody would maintain their house number, that which you had written may work. I think the challenge there again is just, some guideline that is the best for public safety response without being unreasonable, trying to be flexible, give people many options. I'm certainly not so interested in what the fine is, more just giving somebody guidelines to what we think is ideal.
Good. Thank you. Okay, then with that, that really concludes our public meeting on these 3 bylaws, and I want to thank everyone for coming. What I do want to say, though, there are a number of you, that we have 2 vacancies on the bylaws committee, and there are a number of you who recited some chapters and verses of research that you did. So I think we have some good candidates here in the audience that we may be speaking to later. So I do thank you for coming and for the feedback to tonight's session. And where it's appropriate, and we'll certainly incorporate your input. Once we produce the next final draft, it will go to the Select Board for their approval. The bylaws then go to Town Council to ensure that we are in compliance with all state laws and regulations. Ultimately, the decision to accept the bylaws rests with the town and will be voted on at a subsequent town meetings. When a bylaw passes town meeting, it does not necessarily mean it goes into effect immediately. It will, unless and until the state's Attorney General has reviewed and approved the final language. So you can see that this all takes some time from start to finish. But this is certainly a good beginning, and I really appreciate the participation. And I thank certainly the people who gave up their evening to be with us tonight and to I think, help educate, because that's what this is all about. Through this broadcast, and hopefully some people will look at the recorded session and get a better understanding of what the concerns are and what the bylaws are intending to address. It's certainly not to over-legislate, and we hear you, and we'll go back and we'll look at these things, and we certainly want to do, as John said, we want to use common sense in everything that we do. So I thank you, and it is now 7:10, and so I'll close the meeting. It's not official. I don't know that we need to have a vote or anything, do we, Ed? So public meeting? Or we just adjourn?
We just adjourn because it's not a public hearing.
Okay. Public meeting, right. Okay, so with that, have a good evening, and thank you very much for coming, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.